about about the current political landscape that gave rise to the Crown government's efforts to fast-track major projects. This will have major implications for First Nations lands and waters and for all of you that protect our lands and waters. So our next panel, it will help explore these implications. It will be facilitated by our friend Larry Innes, who is a partner at OKT, Altius, Clear, Townsend. You know, I never knew what the OKT stood for, so thank you for that. You know, it's just easy to say, law firm. Larry represents and advises Indigenous communities across the North on land and resource management issues, including the establishment of Indigenous protected and conserved areas, which actually my community is considering, and we're doing our due diligence. Larry is also a strategic advisor with the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. He will be joined by senior leaders from the ILI, whom he will introduce. Would you welcome to the stage Larry and the panel, please?
So when Val first asked me to put some words together and think a few thoughts about what I know people have been talking about, these projects of national interest or major project proposals, and the legislation that Ontario, British Columbia have both now passed, and Canada has now introduced to try and fast track these major projects, I thought, this would be the perfect time to do like this really long constitutional law lecture and talk about the division of powers between Parliament and the provinces. And then I said, no, that would be a really dumb way to approach this. So what I'd really like to talk about is what you are all doing as guardians, because these projects, these proposals, these processes that your governments, your Indigenous governments are all involved in, that your leaders are spending a lot of time thinking about, and that you on the ground for your communities are going to be directly engaged in one way or another, are opportunities as much as they are crises. And to talk about these things only as something that is happening to you versus something that your leaders, your communities, your nations have a lot of say, and in fact, I will say, the right to say yes or no to, is a much more interesting place to start. So let me maybe begin with, can I go back one? Trying to get the hand here. There we go. So, yeah, pictures of three white guys in suits doing their thing, standing up in front of their legislatures, looking serious, talking about projects of national importance or nation-building projects. And there is a huge context in which this is all occurring. Canada has found itself in a really weird place with its long-term bestie, the United States. This has upended much of what Canadians take for granted about how their economy works and more what their place in the world is. And the politicians, both at the federal, the provincial, and the territorial levels in Canada, are all taking a great deal of, I will say, incentive from this to go out and boldly declare that Canada can stand on its own, that Canada can put forward these big projects in the national interest and get them done quickly to reduce the dependency on the United States, to get new resources to markets, to create energy security within Canada. And yes, they all say it, although it's funny, only one of them wrote it into their legislation, build new partnerships with Indigenous governments. So we're in this moment where these governments are leading, and in the case of both Ontario and British Columbia, which Frank and Dave are going to be talking about from their own perspectives, they've led with their chin. They've gotten out in front of Indigenous leaders. They have put forward legislation without prior consultation that promises, but I can almost guarantee will not deliver, a fast-track approval for these major projects. And this has, of course, generated a big pushback where Indigenous leaders from coast to coast to coast have said, not so fast. Any project that goes through our territory has to go forward with our consent. And this is where I'd like to take us next, because we've seen this movie before. This is not a new thing. Canada as a nation was built around this idea of a railroad from coast to coast. 1867, 1870, 1873, the railroad went through. It was preceded by treaty making in much of the country. That was the project of national interest at that time. Of course, we've also seen the provinces take their own turns. You know, the province of Quebec, Hydro-Quebec, Maître chez nous, that whole move to industrialize the north, to build the big dams in Cree territory in the 1970s and 1980s in Quebec, led to the first modern treaty in the country, the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, where the Cree stood up and said, we will decide for ourselves the terms under which these projects can proceed. And that was 50, 60 years ago. I remember sitting on a stage in 2012 when the Stephen Harper government brought forward its changes to Canada's environmental assessment legislation, saying we're going to move projects forward faster, and that didn't happen. They promised that they would bring forward these expedited project approval processes, and what they were met instead with was a head wall of litigation by Indigenous governments from coast to coast, standing up to say there's no way that any of these projects, whether they be pipelines or highways or mines or what have yous, are going to occur without fully consulting and accommodating our communities. Fast forward a few more years. 2016, Canada signs on to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People without reservation, promising to change Canada's laws to uphold the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples as peoples under international law. And in the articles of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the words free, prior, and informed consent appear over and over and over again. Canada passed a law saying that it would adopt UNDRIP and it would bring Canada's laws in conformity to the United Nations Declaration. British Columbia has done the same thing. The Northwest Territories has done the same thing. The province of Manitoba, under its new premier, Wab Kinew, has promised to bring forward legislation there, all about this idea of consent. So this brings us to this question of whose national interest these major projects are actually referencing. This idea that Canada, as a nation of white people that does whatever it wants, belongs to a distant past. Unfortunately, the politicians haven't yet gotten that message, but the courts certainly have. We know that whatever Parliament does, whatever the legislature does, lives downstream and underneath the Constitution, which in Section 35, as you all know, upholds your rights. And the Constitution is the supreme law in Canada, a law made by Parliament or made by a province that does not meet the requirements of Section 35 in recognizing and affirming your Aboriginal and treaty rights will be blocked by the courts. And I won't go into all the different ways this can happen because it would be a much longer lecture. But developers understand this. They know that for major projects with billions of dollars on the line, the fastest way that they can lose money is by trying to push forward a project in the face of Indigenous opposition. But the opposite is also true. There are countless examples around the country of projects where Indigenous people are on the lead, where they themselves are saying, this is how we see ourselves meeting our needs into the future. We're going to set the terms for consent. We're going to make sure that our community is fully benefiting on the land, in the community, and in the economy from this project at every step of the way. And those sorts of projects are the kinds of projects that when I think about projects in the nation's interest, I think that there is room in this conversation about projects of national interest for those things to occur. And I know that many of your leaders, and those of you in the room who are leaders, are having those conversations at the provincial level, at the national level, at the territorial level, and you're making your voices heard such that when Canada, looking to the left and looking to the right and saying, oh, Ontario didn't do so well, you got David all mad, you've got the Ring of Fire still on fire, and I won't even go into all the ways that the Premier in British Columbia has failed to deliver on the promises that he made to the chiefs to seek their consent for their major projects before bringing forward Bill 15. The chiefs themselves have been very clear on those points. But the Prime Minister, in both writing the throne speech, whereas you'll recall the King, in reading the speech written by the government to the Parliament, when Parliament opened a few weeks ago, said that Canada's government would always be guided by the principle of free, prior, and informed consent, has brought forward legislation which is a little different, which requires a two-step process. One, for projects to be proposed and to get onto a list set out in the law, where the schedule of projects of national interest will be part of the legislation. It's currently blank. And the process for getting a project on that list is first and foremost for Canada to make sure it ticks all the boxes, national importance, economic, environmental, but then to work in partnership with Indigenous governments, the provinces and territories. They're all on the same line. It's not, we'll figure it out with the provinces and then consult Indigenous people. It's work in partnership with Indigenous governments, provinces, and territories to move these projects onto that list. And then the question is how that project would proceed. So the whole premise of all of these laws is that a project, once designated, is then on the fast track to approval. But as you all know, because you do the work, having a project approved in principle and having all the details worked out are two very different things. And it's figuring out those details, how the project would generate the ecological, the cultural, and the economic benefits for communities that still needs to be figured out. And the federal law sets out a process by which that's also a basis for partnership with Indigenous governments to say, if it's going to be built, this is how it would be built, which provides then in the legislation what are called the approval conditions for the project. And this does not in any way bypass any of the mechanisms that are set out in the treaties. So when a lawyer reads this legislation, they look really quickly and they say, okay, what laws does this affect? And importantly, none of the federal laws that are listed as being affected by this fast-track project include any of the laws implementing the modern treaties. So the Nishka agreement, which is implemented through a federal act of parliament, is not on this list. None of the BC modern treaty implementing legislation is on this list. None of the northern, Yukon, Northwest Territories, or Nunavut treaty implementation legislation is on this list, which means that all of the co-management processes that exist in this country, where Indigenous governments are already at the table as governments working across the table with Canada, the provinces, or the territories, are not affected in any way, because Canada understands that it can't break these treaties. It would love to, I'm sure, but the lawyers in the Department of Justice are at least saying you have to follow those laws because they're enshrined in our Constitution. There will be many, many challenges in the how things get done, but in terms of the process going forward, I am completely convinced that there is no project that is going to get close to being on this list that will not have the support of Indigenous governments. Now, how that looks like in the particulars, lots of questions. But as a starting place, that's where we seem to begin. So the question is, what happens now? And this is where Frank, deeply rooted in many, many projects and many different processes in British Columbia, and David, from the Ontario perspective, are going to weigh in. I'm going to drink some water. And then we're going to try and figure out between us, and I'm hoping that we can actually get some of you involved, because you bring your own experiences, your own situations, you know what's going on in your territory, to this conversation, because this question of what you do as guardians in this moment now is what matters. So with that, Dave, Frank, which one of you wants to go first?
Chimigwech, Dishtaka Zonze Maengan, Matachwan First Nation Adonjaba, Bingwizi Dodam, come from Treaty 9 territory. It's the height of land in the Canadian Shield. The land base of Treaty 9 is 2/3 of Northern Ontario, and there's 49 First Nations that signed the treaty. There's an adhesion treaty to Treaty 9 as well. It's a massive undertaking for Ontario to even understand how to build a relationship with that northern geography, because it still hasn't done it. They think that, far north in Ontario is Timmins now, Timmins, Sudbury, when there's another 600 kilometers to the coastline. It's saddening in some ways. I don't even think I'm pretty sure Doug Ford has not gone any further north than Thunder Bay and Timmins. He's not gone and flown into one of our remote northern communities to get a taste, a flavor for what that actually looks like, feels like. So shame on him. Shame on him as an acting government where, all he's done is continually, in my personal view, as a forester, an advocate, a geopolitical animal that serves chiefs to try and create outcomes. When I seen Bill 5 come out and I saw how fast it was coming down the pipe for approval, it really struck me that, if you hear me talk, you'll always hear me talk about Little Brother Section 92 and this power to the provinces to manage the resources to the benefit of the citizens of the province. Well, you got to remember when 1867 happened, Indigenous people were not considered citizens. They became wards of the state under the Indian Act. Total separation of that relationship and responsibilities. So bring Section 35, 1982, we're still, not what we're learning. I think we always knew as Indigenous people what our expectations were in those relationships. It's just being human, having the right covenants between our peoples, and sharing and wanting to be participants in growing, utilizing. The pie is big. The land is huge. There's no shortage of it, and we have people starving and homeless, and it's a terrible design. Colonialism, capitalism is a terrible design, and that's what we're faced with. So when Bill 5 comes around, it's like 1867 all over again. It's like, here, we're going to do this one more time for the next 100 years, and this government is going to be able to do any particular project that it wants across the landscapes. We're struggling right now within our territories, where I am, sustainable forest licenses, commercial industrial forestry under the Crown Forest Sustainability Act. It's been in place now for since 1995, and all we're seeing is this constant death by 1,000 cuts, erosion of everything that our communities try to come to the table and explain and exhibit. Herbicide spraying is going on, habitat loss is going on, our species more and more are on the decline and becoming at risk, and yet it doesn't seem to matter. And so I actually asked the question, what's the purpose of Bill 5? They were already running around doing it all anyway. I mean, I guess it's like stampy, no erase it. I really mean what I'm saying. I'm going to tear down, all the environmental assessment requirements in Ontario, and away we go. Yeah, I think our communities understand what crisis is and what living through extreme impoverishment means and resilience means. And so I personally am grappling with this truth and reconciliation time we're supposed to be in. And regardless of the trade relationship issue, if we're going to use the word Canada and Canadians, then really what is that right relationship within our First Nations, Indigenous people, and the rest of Canada? We're not partisan. We're not something to flip around and say yes or no to. We will always be here. So these bills do not match that relationship at all. And for the 3 communities that I serve at Wahkotuwan Development right now, we've launched a cumulative impacts court case premised on that very specific question, that Ontario does not have a way to measure cumulative impacts on our Aboriginal rights and treaty rights. There is no piece of their legislation or no policy that they track and understand what this death by 1,000 cuts that we're talking about, and measure that on how is it that are we able to continue our normal vocation since the time of treaty? And I always try to remind people, when we use the words hunt, fish, and trap, that's a full description of our societal governance system. That is the way we integrated ourselves in the landscape. That's Wahkotuwan. But it was diluted to hunt, fish, trap in the time of treaty making, because that was the simplest way to communicate an economic relationship with the land. And the belief was we didn't know how to maximize the benefit of the return off the land. So I'll just pause there, because I think that's a good segue. We have great ambitions to do 30 by 2030. Our chiefs have said in the next round of forest management plans, we must see that on the landscape. We will not sign off on forestry in our territories until that happens. So this does not sit well with Bill 5, right? And then if they're going to open up these deemed zones, who's deciding them? Is FPIC actually achievable within those constructs? I still think there's a power imbalance in that decision making. It's yet to present itself, but we shall see.
First of all, I want to acknowledge our elder and leader from Lekwungen Songhees Nation. Thank you for joining us today and to do the business on your land. We appreciate your presence. It means a lot to us. I think that we knew this was coming, but it's happening faster than anticipated. That's why we are doing the work, and I'm grateful for the ILI and the National Guardian Network to be able to, I'm grateful for the Guardians and those of you that support Guardians to do this work. And I encourage you to take this message home from this discussion that's happening, because it's going to have an impact on all of us. It simply is a setup for a justification of infringement into our rights and title. That language was crafted some time ago around in the national interest, and they finally legislated it. It came out a few days ago, the federal legislation, C5, and the Ontario legislation is the same number, C5. And the second part of the federal legislation is about the national interest. The first part sounds good, you know, to be able to work in transboundary, and it's kind of in response to this U.S. tariff. And I actually remember talking to the Minister of the Environment. I was at the Ledge, and I said, in my view, I think it's crazy to basically accelerate the major projects and to maintain and accelerate the status quo on these economic models that have brought a lot of harm to our people and our way of life. And I think it's foolhardy and irresponsible because it's having a negative impact on our future generations. And we need to, as the guardians of this land and water and resources, prepare ourselves to do the work on behalf of our respective nations to protect the lands, waters, and resources. We have been preparing ourselves, but it's accelerating, you know, across this continent and across the world. Because when I was talking to the minister, we're talking about erasing the very essence of our lives, the water and the clean air that we breathe by increase of industrialization to maintain our quality of life in the Western world. And at what great cost? Because the not taking into consideration the whole natural capital equation, and all we have is an economist who's looking at the financial capital side of the equation. And what we need to do as the native place-based peoples of these lands is have a unified voice, a national strategy that we could support through the National Guardian Network and the ILI to bring some cohesion around a national strategy for this type of development, the counterbalance, the counter-narrative. Because lots of times people always say, and we experienced this on the coast, we've been involved in this in a long time. You know, they say Indians are anti-development. We're not anti-development. You know, we held the line for non-native people when they were talking about clear-cut logging the whole territory. It was us that were on those logging roads. Said, there's no damn way you're coming into our territories to do that. And now the convention is that you know, we need to preserve biodiversity by maintaining old-growth forests. Well, duh. Didn't we say that? The other thing is, we went to the Supreme Court of Canada on a fishing case called the Gladstone decision, and one of the comments from a Supreme Court judge was, just because DFO assumed jurisdictional authority of this resource did not mean it was an extinguishment of the Healthstock right to harvest and sell herring roe on kelp. Full stop. These people got to shake their heads and realize what the hell they're doing here. And we need to get organized to prepare for this. You know, and I'm so happy the Guardians are here. Bring this message home to your leadership. You know, to be able to start to strategize on how we're going to do this. The chiefs of Canada are meeting very soon in July. Calgary? Winnipeg. In Winnipeg. They're going to be talking about this. We need to come up with a very clear strategy on how we're going to go forward. We're not saying we're anti-development. We're saying this has to comply to our values. Like, for example, our land use plans and our marine use plans that have ecosystem-based management at the foundation of it. If you want to engage with us, does this comply? And if it does, then it gets bumped over to economic development to establish some type of a written formal agreement, whether it's a impact benefit agreement, a joint venture agreement, or equity, all of that conversations. But we don't even get there until we know that this complies to what we need to have for our future generations to ensure that the resources are sustainable across the whole value system, not just financial capital. So we've got our work cut out for us, but we have been here before. Time and time and time again, since the newcomers arrived, we have been a witness to the boom and bust, boom and bust, boom and bust. Started with furs for all of us across this great country. And fishing for us and mining for others. Boom and bust. When are these people going to learn that we have to do things differently? Not just for the Indians, not just for the natives, but for all of us. That's what we have to do. We have to be the voice of reason in this conversation.
I couldn't agree more, because the only way that these projects are even going to get on a list as being project in the national interest is if they are in your nation's interest. And who is going to make that decision? That's going to be your communities, your leaders, and they're going to need to be informed by the work that you do on the ground. You're the boots, the moccasins on the ground. You are seeing what's going on the territory. You know where the important places are. You know where the sensitive places are. You know what's not worked in the past. And so if Canada is serious, if the provinces are serious about moving things forward more quickly, there's the way they've always done it, which is, let's try something, let's see if they take us to court. Oh, we're in court? Oh, I guess we'll have to be in court for a while. And we're in court for a while. And then finally, somewhere 10 years later, there's a decision. I mean, that's the old way. But there's also the way of looking ahead and saying, if this is a project in our nation's interest, how do we get the things that we need for Indigenous communities? Why don't we start the discussion there for the first time in 157 years and begin to have the conversation about what the terms and conditions are? As Frank and as David has vindicated, there are all sorts of lessons we can learn about how not to do things. But when it comes to things like, and I'll use examples from the Northwest Territories where I live, where communities who've been challenged by climate change, where you can't get a barge down the Decho River because the water is too low, where you can't rely on an ice road because it's melting, maybe it's time for an all-season highway. It'll cost billions and billions of dollars, but this is money that Canada says it wants to spend on projects in the national interest. So why aren't these projects that communities in the Satu and Gwich'in and Quechua regions require at the top of the list? Like, who's making these lists? And I'm sure that you can think of examples of things in your own regions where things that your communities need that are in your national interest have been at the bottom of somebody else's list for a long time. Perhaps this is one of those moments to bring those things forward and your leaders sitting down across the table, picking up on the words that have been used, building a partnership, proceeding on the basis of free, prior, and informed consent. There is the opportunity to have those conversations in that way, and guardians can play a very important role in shaping that conversation so that your nations can have the issues, the concerns, the experiences that you all bring taken seriously, and that the outcomes of these projects will actually be the things that apply.
I got a couple of things here. Establish national standards ensuring a meaningful participation, consent, and decision-making authority from First Nations in all resource development processes. Ensure that both environmental assessments and full regulatory frameworks for major project approvals are co-developed and co-implemented by First Nations. Safeguard the environmental integrity of First Nations territories through First Nations-led stewardship, guardian programs, monitoring, inspection, and enforcement. Let's start there.
Well, that's good, Frank, and it leads me to another question that I know we're going to be challenged with, and that is businesses will not bring hundreds of millions of dollars into regions where there's no certainty. And that's another piece that comes with free, prior, and informed consent. We in Ontario are dealing with a 2006 provincial level consultation policy. That's what they publicly present. Consultation has changed a lot since 2006. So that used to be, tell us your issues and concerns. We may or may not listen to them. Sorry, Dave. Thank you. Yes. I'll talk to you later. And I'm going to carry on. That's why I'm confused about this Bill 5 thinking. I mean, they operate that way anyway, still. Now, the Liberals, up until the recent Conservative government came in, they were one election away from actually moving forward with reconciliation in the province of Ontario with actually a 2-year consultation roadshow that was going to bring around a whole new voice of engagement and FPIC and consultation with First Nations. So I really, it's just amazing, like this partisan, nonpartisan thing. Why wouldn't the new Conservative government have looked at that at a minimum and picked that up and gave it some forethought? Because look where we are now. We're in a bad spot. This is a bad spot. The Ring of Fire is not in a good spot. You know, and if you want to pick a fight up north in Northern Ontario with the Matawa and the Mushkego Chiefs, and the Waban Chiefs are likely going to follow suit, and all of the 49 First Nations, go ahead, try and get on the bulldozer. That's what Doug Ford says every time he gets elected. I'm going to get on the bulldozer, and I'm going to open up the Ring of Fire. Well, you've heard Salma Makwa say it. Get on the bulldozer, Doug. Come on, come and really see what it looks like up here. Give it a go. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the certainty piece because we're talking about billions of dollars, trillions of dollars of potential major project investment. You'd think the governments of Canada at the federal and provincial level would want to move towards certainty by making sure there is the meaningful consultation regime. And that platform that you just described, the structure, the framework was, well, that's a good place to start talking about, at a minimum, having those checks and balances. And I just think it's inspirational for our broader guardian programs at the community level, because our communities struggle with forming lands and resource departments, and it's for this reason. It's we are under-resourced, you know, to be seen as true governments. And I think this could be a turning point of, while it feels very negative, it can turn into a very big positive. If we just turn to the capitalistic side of where the money's coming from and be very clear with what our regions expect, this could be a game changer of, you know, where industry gets to tap little brother on the shoulder and go, are you listening? Because we are, and we're not putting our money there till you guys figure this out. Yeah. Which...
Masi, and this is exactly what you all know, is that investments in your communities, in your programs, these are the billions and millions and thousands and hundreds of percents that governments, if they were serious about building nations, would start with. These are the investments in a new way of working, not in the interest of one nation, the people who came from away and made Canada, but of all of the nations that live on these lands, and take the premise in the Constitution seriously that Indigenous people were here first, with inherent rights that have never been ceded, never been surrendered, that are recognized and affirmed in treaties and in other relationships on a government-to-government and nation-to-nation basis. That is the only path forward. And as David indicated, the money understands that. Like, no one is rushing to invest in the Ring of Fire because of the uncertainty, no matter how many times Doug Ford says he's going to get on the bulldozer, because they know the legal reality and the political reality of doing business in that part of Ontario, Mattawa territory, is that it will only happen when the Mattawa chiefs are satisfied that their considerations, that their concerns, and that their communities have their needs met. And this is, again, where the work that you do as guardians in creating the conditions for real investments in people, in communities, in your environment, in your culture, in your language, in the lessons that you can pass on to the next generations. That is where Canada's real strength is. That is where the real economy is. It's not anymore a place where you can just come in and take. It's a place where you have to invest and you have to build. And we say that the law has now moved to a point where that is the starting place for a discussion about building a project in the national interest.
So I think this is pretty malleable right now. Canada hasn't identified the projects because once they do, people are going to line up and, we're going to align ourselves, we'll ally ourselves as First Nations across this country to support those that are in need. We talk about that, in this together. That's the theme of this, this gathering, to work together. We're going to support each other in this process. That needs to be a message too. We can't do this by ourselves. Look at, what happened with Idle No More, We'll come together if we have to. There's this position of justification of infringement. Is it justifiable to destroy these resources? We got to find a balance here. That's a part of the challenge, and we need to be involved in that conversation. And so we don't know what this is going to look like yet. We have to stand by and be ready, and we have to support our leadership. We have to, those people that have those positions of responsibility, we need to hold them up and get our communities ready for whatever is going to come down, because Canada's just biding their time. They're waiting, and they're not ready because they don't know what they got to make some strategic decisions. And the same with the provinces about where's the line in the sand for them? What is the hill to die on for them? Because they're in trouble too. These federal and provincial treasuries they're in trouble, and so we need to think this through and be ready and be ready to take action.
Miigwech, Frank. In Ontario, just as an example, just another element, a layer of the cake, if you want to talk about building something, the most recent Robinson Huron treaty decision of annuity payments was discussed. There was an 1850s treaty, prior to Confederacy and prior to the numbered treaties. And if we want to talk about participating in the prosperity, I mean, that's like, it's not just certainty for business, it's certainty for us as citizens of our lands and territories and our stewardship responsibility. So there's two prongs here that I wanted to point out was Canada and the provinces can't pay that bill. In a retrospective aspect, they can't pay the bill. So settling all these annuities and the arrears and all this, they'll do their best, but we don't frankly have that much time to look back and take another 50 years to settle those things It is about looking forward and how we all play a role in that. And we are so globalized now that we are at the front lines of climate change and climate action. That's why we have our fire discussion and what remediations we can do, so we'll continue to coexist and steward and be able to live within our landscapes that we call home, while all these other major projects are contemplated, and how to mitigate any part of those major projects so we can find a way to coexist. We should have always been involved in those conversations right from go, and maybe we wouldn't be in the problem or situations we are in today. But we surely have enough lessons across Canada, from the, the seafood stocks in the east to all the different major industrial. I mean, I keep thinking about the Athabasca Basin and the oil sands and the poisoning and the cancer. The smelters in Sudbury and the major mining. Just go right across Canada. The extinguishment of the bison to make way for agriculture and through the prairies. I mean, there's so much industrialization and commercialization that was done that pushed us out. We were never part of that prosperity. What's next? We've got a little bit left to be part of something that's going to try and create some level of sustainability. We got to be part of that driver's seat. And when they met recently, they call that the Confederacy Council. That thing's been meeting since Confederacy. That's the premiers and Canada when they meet. I think it's time that our chiefs and AFN meet side by side together there. That is leadership at the national level. That's where we have the say. We're not coming in after saying, what did you decide? Please tell us so we can, no. That's got to stop. It's time to stop that. Otherwise, we end up back in the courts, and nobody likes that because nobody really wants to be spending money for that. You can help ink the agreements that move us forward. Never mind being in the courts. Yeah. There's other places for legal representation. That was a good one, Larry. What about me?
You just found way too much joy in that.
Yeah, no, I just, we're a few degrees off from each other, I find. Like, I really wish there was, ILI is a non-political based entity growing the Guardian program across Canada and really trying to invigorate nation building. And it is a joy to be participating in that senior policy or senior advisor role myself at ILI. It's a joy to see Guardian programs across Canada running and growing and what can come of this. But at the nation building level, at the geopolitical level, there is that respect level, the Indian Brotherhood and the AFN, and that will help make it right. I mean, it's on its heels right now. AFN, frankly, has been on its heels for the last 3-4 terms. And why? Well, it's because we haven't found a way to create the joint voice at that trilateral table that makes up Canada. And we need to be written back into the Constitution and Confederacy of Canada. And you'd think Section 35 might have been it. No, it's because they still allow little brother to tromp all over us. That's got to be done.
100%. We'd like to open this up to all of you because, while we're smart and good-looking guys up here, we certainly don't have the last word. We wanted to give that to you. So if anyone has questions, comments, there's a microphone that is going around.
Hello. Oh, cool. Is it working? Okay. Hello, everybody. So I have a question, more of a conflict for me as a guardian, because it really bothers me. I know you guys talked about it for like 2 minutes, and then after it was kind of pushed to the side. Bill 15, that went through. That really bothers the crap out of me. That pins a whole bunch of communities down in BC right now. And my main question is, how are we going to respond to it? Especially with the other guardians, the other nations that supported it. How do we feel about that? That's not what land guardians do. We don't support something like that. That really bothers the crap out of me. Like, what are we going to do? We have to stand against those things. Did that nation had a double-edged sword against them or something? Did they have no other choice? Us as guardians should be able to reach out to each other and help each other. Tell them, hey, there's a solution. If you're going through this, we can help. We can help. That's what I think, and that's what I'm wondering.
Thank you for that comment. I think every First Nation is self-determining. You know, like in our territory, as an example, we don't support finfish aquaculture, but some of our neighbors do. They participate. I don't agree with it, but that's their decision, and we have to respect that. And but we still have to have those difficult conversations, like what you're saying, like what's going on here, and we need to communicate amongst ourselves, because we don't need other governments driving a wedge between us. You know, actually, the Guardians program has been an effective way of keeping our communities together, because it's non-political. We're looking after the wild salmon, looking after all of the creatures that go across the land and the water, because they don't know our government boundaries or territorial boundaries. So that's where there's some common interest. The political table is different than the Guardian table, and that political discipline matters. We wouldn't have had the success that we've had if it wasn't for that political discipline in our communities. And it's not easy. Like the question you have is valid, and that's just my opinion. I see there's another hand up over there.
My name's Dion. I'm with the Sayout First Nation. I just like to make a comment too as well, like regarding the 157 years ago. Well, yes, sure enough. Since the beginning of time of economic business with our nations, involving our nations, they should have been good neighbors from the beginning, and walk the territory with the First Nations and say, this, we have a plan, we would like to involve you. You know, and it should be that way today. They should be going through the land with the nations, the nation people, and say, look, we have a plan, we'd like to involve you. We want to employ you, and we want to employ you for the full time of the project. We'll train you, everything. This has to be done, and you know, and there has to be involvement from them and agreement, of course, naturally, before anything else happens. And I think also one of my biggest peeves that I always have, and I've had for decades, where is the clean drinking water? If our nation people are going to set any kind of agreements with the governments, we should get together and say we like to put a clause in there. If we're going to do business with you, we want our relatives to have clean drinking water. And nothing will go through until this happens. If we're going to stick together, we got to make sure we're all looked after together. So we got to make those things, those clauses, you know, we got to make sure that everybody's looked after, regardless of what happens, you know. That's a little comment that I wanted to share. Thank you.
They don't want me to talk, David, probably. The government's listening. You know what I'd like to see too, like we talk about UNDRIP, we talk about our leadership. Through the Indian Act, that's created our chief and councils. I would like to see our off-member reserves, every community member have a say in these projects and rights, because through the Indian Act, it's created some bad actors in our leadership. And at community level, sometimes the voices of our elders, our youth, members that are caring for the land aren't always heard or listened to. So it's almost not enough just to have our chief and council supported, but it's got to be engaged at a community level where we talk to the elders, we talk to the land users, and take all their voices into consideration for these projects. Miigwech.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Matt Munson. My Dene name is Yves Claus Dedzina. I'm with Deneda First Nation. My experience with developers and governments is they will come to us asking about how their proposals are going to harm us. So for example, what are the impacts to your rights from what we're proposing to do? And right from the get-go, I feel like that's an adversarial process. And not once have I ever had a government or proponent come to us and say, here's what we're proposing. How is this going to help you? And I'm wondering, perhaps, is this maybe an opportunity to flip this conversation on its head? And so we are now talking about benefits, partnerships, cooperative arrangements that are not at the end of a consultation process where we're going to tell you how this is going to harm us. You're going to minimize it, dismiss it, challenge it on the record, which is humiliating and insulting. Only then, when we find some residual impact that they can't explain away with their hired scientists, consultants, and law firms, only then are we talking about benefits, but only commensurate to the same level that they could not dismiss our concerns. So I'm wondering if this possibly could be an opportunity to flip that conversation on its head. Let's talk about how we're going to benefit from the projects that they're going to be proposing, and not have to prove in Western ways how these are going to harm our communities, and only then do we talk about getting some residual benefit. Thank you.
Hello. Bonjour. Ani nojo mashkode bejike indijne kaz name do dem baskanda be wizbingnish be aki indunji. My name is Taylor. I'm from Broken Head Ojibwe Nation in Manitoba. One of the things that I find troubling, and one thing that's missing at this gathering, and we're talking about, leadership and AFN and all these types of things, but what about the challenges we face with our leaders who don't always agree with what land guardianship is all about, or the work that our guardians are doing, and why aren't those leaders here supporting our guardians and the work that they're doing? And I know that we're in BC, and so there are some leaders here from the BC Nation, but imagine how powerful it would be if our leaders from Manitoba were here with us and supporting us. And I feel that one of the challenges here is that we're not talking about the resistance that sometimes we feel as water protectors and land guardians from our own supposed leaders. And so I'm wondering, how do we address that? Because in a perfect world, all of our leaders are environmentalists, but in reality, that's not true. And so I find there's a lot of ego and competition amongst our nations, especially in Manitoba, and what the great work that's being done in one province isn't always transferable to another, because we're different treaties, we're different landscapes, we're different water bodies, we're different laws and assessments and this type of stuff. And so I'm wondering, how do we address the challenges that we face within our own leadership, and how do we get them to be more present on the land and on the water with those of us who are at the forefront and on those front lines?
That is one of probably the biggest questions, is how are we going to maintain unity going into this exercise in front of us? I myself, and I know I've talked to many others, I've had a very limited time to be able to work in my own First Nation as the professional that I am. I'm not called upon. I'm not asked to come and advise my First Nations leadership. I hear so many times throughout many guardians that I've talked to that they're not feeling empowered or taken interest in by portfolio holders in their community and the leadership. But meanwhile, you hear election time and every chief's platform is, I believe in the environment, I believe in upholding the, I hear you, Taylor. I do not get it. I do not get it. And some of it is about the reconciliation that has to happen across our families within our communities. I mean, if there's one thing the Indian Act did, is it taught our people's power the fight for power over the dollar and who holds power in the communities with the Indian Act election cycle. I mean, that is well written about. The Indian agent did their job of hurting, harming, and separating our leadership capabilities in addition to the residential schools and those impacts. The fact that we're here and able to talk about that today, I mean, you got to remember there was a fellow by the name of Duncan Campbell Scott, and he didn't want this to be around. So, you know, like the fact that we can actually articulate, you know, what the plan was, the whole genocidal oppression plan was. But what it takes is what you just did right there. What it takes is all of us to go home and try and have these direct conversations about we need to start making a deeper change in our communities. We need to create more unity on the things that are important to the people of our communities. And in that way, you will start to see the change in voting your leadership in that actually care about your guardian programs. I don't think there's a silver bullet here. I mean, that means you got to stick your head up and it could get whacked, right? I mean, that's one of those things where having a big voice at your home local community level might not work in your nation. But I'm an optimist by nature, and I just, you know, do everything, every option, every single thing in your power. Do it your own way. You followed your own path into higher levels of academic, and look where you are now, a fellow. You got a bigger voice. You know, that voice will resonate. And I think, as I tell people, I don't want another 100 years to go by and feel like we haven't moved the yardsticks as Indigenous people in our communities. I'd like it to take less than 25 years. 10 would be wonderful. You know, 10 years is a good incubator. Like I asked the question of the Guardian Youth panel here earlier, where do you see your Guardian programs that you're in 10 years? I see them as very powerful. I see them as very inspiring. I see them as authorities throughout all of our territories. And I think these things are going to grow and every community will have them. I would use these moments as Bill 5 and 15 as the catalyst to grow more programs. This is the way we take action. And by taking action, you're going to get different leaders. I don't think there's a silver bullet to making that change, but I think there's huge issues of lateral violence, and as you said, ego, and that power struggle within communities to actually say what, like, walk the talk. Don't just talk about environment is important, because it is about showing you at the end of the day in many of our communities, we've got some bad leaders out there.
I'd like to comment on the question too. I think the answers are in our communities. You know, our people are brilliant, resilient, and if we take that sacred circle and like as the living descendants of our ancestors who are here, if we abide by our ways and incorporate that into our governance, like where we could sit amongst ourselves and agree in the circle that is the path forward. It shouldn't be an either or. We have to strike the balance because we are not who our ancestors were, and the circumstances are far different. And so that resiliency and genius and brilliance within our systems and our culture and our language exists there, and we have to pull that out and inform and guide us as we move forward. And that's the work that we're doing here within the Guardian movement. I was in 2 sessions, the training and accreditation program, and so much of the comments was about going back to that ancestral wisdom, because I think we all intuitively recognize that's really the source of our power and our strength. And we need to move in that direction as guardians and community advocates. Thanks.
For those that don't know who Duncan Campbell Scott is, he was one of the architects of generating the Indian Act, the genocide movement. And one of his most famous phrases, and he spent over 40 years in the Bureau of Indigenous Affairs, Department of Indian Affairs. His job was not over till the last Indian was absorbed into the body politic. So when I said, you know, the theory was he did not expect us to be doing this today. So roll over in your grave, Duncan Campbell Scott. We're here.
Good afternoon, guys. My name's Cheyenne. I'm from Northern Saskatchewan. And I'm just wondering if you have any kind of advice that you can give to me, being that I'm from a small First Nation that is surrounded by a few Métis communities, and what kind of advice you can give us for building alliances and getting over the difficulty that we've had in land issues and negotiations, and just being able to assert our sovereignty over our lands and waters without, in a way that's good for everybody.
So in Ontario, we're deeply involved in the Métis conversation, and you know, there is such a strong history of the fur trade and the coming about of the Métis people, and what it takes to become a Métis designated community in the Canadian context. In our case in Ontario, a lot of people that are declaring Métis are really people that probably should be part of our First Nations membership proper. And I mean, if you look within the Métis communities around you, you probably have relatives and cousins, if you will, cousins, you know, at the time of the settlement. But I mean, I'll say it this way: the Métis communities have a use right. You have the land right, and I would say, if you're like a First Nation, but you're not affiliated with others, I mean, if you're affiliated with others, then go gather strength and try and work as a collaborative to help build your ability to take up that space and declare your territory and take ownership. But it is very confusing when you have two different Indigenous jurisdictions interfacing like that, and it sounds like as you say, you're surrounded. I'll glad to give you my card after and get into more of a deeper conversation about what exactly are your issues, like as a community, what are your issues? But there's a way through that, I'm sure. Happy to talk more about it after.
Sego de no watkwena warado se wagwego, ni gwere ze yonjots de no wagadri hunte ne gahnawage yago de hunsanot na zihe hodonkwa. My name is Ben Green Stacy, and I'm director of Gahnawage's Environment Protection Office. I just want to take a moment to reflect that all of this legislation is coming from a perceived existential threat to the sovereignty of Canada, and that they need to be reminded that this is, to us, an existential threat to our sovereignty if it's improperly implemented. And that narrative, I think, is going to be powerful in helping to open their ears, eyes, throats, to speak better words. So we're in the middle of Canada's second regional impact assessment. In addition to the Ring of Fire, we're doing a regional assessment for the St. Lawrence River. And right now, I think that the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada is equally scared, maybe a little bit, feeling a bit of trepidation around what their role or lack of role might be in the future, especially if projects in the national interest don't have to go through impact assessments. But I do see a role potentially for Guardians to continue to do that work. Frank, you were speaking to land management plans, but I see regional impact assessments and understanding the cumulative impacts of projects, not on a project-by-project basis, but on a landscape scale, as being something that data that can be generated by Guardians programs. And I do see that as a potential area of strength to enhance Guardians programs moving forward. David, you were reflecting on bringing our governments more in line with or being more active in the Constitution. And it sounds a little bit similar to some of the arguments or rationale I've heard for fourth order of government, but historically that's always been a non-starter. And I would like to hear maybe you and Larry reflect on what exactly that enhanced participation looks like without falling into some of those same pitfalls. Thank you.
So this is where I think we're going to end. I just got the, oh, sorry. not going to take.
So there was a request for reflection on the issue of potentially being a fourth order of government. My reference at that Confederacy table was not that. That was equal playing field at the national level. So when the premiers and the prime minister get together at that Confederacy table to decide where major infrastructure and major projects get done, our chiefs at the national level need to be there. Like, it's leveling the playing field. And then, as Frank mentioned earlier in that list he read, there was actually a bit of a clearinghouse or a framework for making sure that there's a just process in making sure that we do arrive at free, prior, and informed consent at the decision-making level of communities, but also a role for guardians to play. So I think it was in line with the structure that you were talking about. There was nothing in what I said that said we should be seen as municipalities. Those were colonial constructs. Those were colonized communities that they dreamed up municipalities for provinces to have transfer payment relationships with. No, we're not. I don't believe in we're municipalities. We're not fourth order. Did that help in any way? Yeah.
Hi, hello. Thank you to the panel for giving us really good information about what is happening and what is going to come in these pieces of legislation that we hear about everywhere, but you put it all there for us. I just want to tell a little story, not too big here. I'm Vantakuch'in, and I'm people of the lakes from North Yukon. In 1987, the United States government wanted to really quickly open up our calving grounds where our caribou give birth in northeastern Alaska to open it up for development. And we're facing the same things here. There's going to be mining and oil and gas like you wouldn't believe. These things they call precious metals that our people live on in this country is going to come. And the young lady that stood up there and asked, how are we going to do this when some of our leadership are saying, yes, 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 we want development. Well, what happened with us is back then, and we live in two different times now, things have changed since then. The elders got together. We flew them in airplanes from every community to a small place in Arctic Village nearest to the caribou calving grounds. And the elders said to us, for 4 days they counseled us. They told us, you are going to be spokespeople. After 4 days they decided that. They chose people from all our Kuch'in communities after they talked to us for those 4 days. And in those 4 days, they told us, you go home now and you rally up your own community and you start building and letting them know exactly what's going to happen to our caribou if this development goes forward. And we get the communities together, and that's what we did. And they told us, after everybody in your community understand what's going on, what's coming, then you go to the next level. You go to your province, your territory. I was told to go to the Yukon Territorial Government. I told you guys that yesterday that Dave Porter pushed me in there, and it was good that I was a member of that government. And I was able to pass legislation in that government, and with everybody on our side, to say no development. From there, we went to Prime Minister of Canada. And we built relationships there as our people, as Kuch'in too, because this is what's going to happen in our land. We can't have this happen here. This is going to destroy everything about our way of life. So we took it to every level, and we worked at the Assembly of First Nations. I worked with this young man here when he was just a young person. We worked at every level of Native organizations in this country, and we brought the messages to them that this is what's going to happen to our people if this goes through. And from there, we got the Canada support and the Indigenous peoples in this country. And we were then now armed with backup to go to the United States government and go visit the presidents of the United States. We went through about 6, 7, 8 of them, and we went to the United States Senate constantly for years and years and years. We were knocking on their door, speaking every place across the United States. This is what we have to do in our country now. When you young people stand up and say, how am I going to do this when my leader is against you? You put your good voice out there. Speak good about your people. Speak good about Mother Earth, what it's going to do. What kind of future do we have left with our water and our animals are getting sick? What are we going to do? We need our people to survive. We need that kind of thing to take care of our own people going forward. And use your voices in that way. Land guardians come from a very spiritual place, and our women leaders come from that deep place. So speak from there, and don't speak. Another thing they told us, if our leaders speak against us, don't give them airtime. Just keep going. Keep going in the good voice, in the good way. So, and we're still fighting that fight right now with one of the worst presidents in the United States, and we got our young ones in Alaska and North Yukon and Northwest Territories now speaking out for us in that way, and we guide them along the process as elders, as experienced people. So we're also here. The ILI leadership is here to support you in your work, and stand up, use your voices. We need you. Use your voices in a good way. Talk about your plants, your medicines, your people and their life. And our animals have the right to have clean water, and our people do too. Because water is the #1 thing. Mining needs lots of water, and believe me, it's messed up all over this country, and it's getting worse, as you know. Oil and gas is coming. And so we have to get ready. It means go back home and talk to the old ones that had experience. Chief sitting here, he had experience. We sit down with them and say, Grandpa, Grandma, I need your advice here. Elizabeth, who was on the film yesterday, she was my mentor. She mentored me. We ran into each other across the country. She pat me on the back, tell me things, what to say and do. Listen to the old ones, and then you go up to the leadership, and the leadership, if they don't listen and they want to go ahead and do that, maybe they might become alone, who knows? But we got to fight, and we've got to fight in a good way. Masi cho shalak nai.
Norma. I was going to do a really simple close, but I can't follow that. So, Shaskabin, thanks everyone for your participation in what is going to be the most important conversation that you have when you go back home. So, Masi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists, to all who joined this important conversation. Shh, we're not done yet. We still have one more thing to go. Somebody was asking about the red carpet photos from last night. If you leave now, you'll never know how to get those. I'm just saying, because I'm not telling you until later. All right. I'd like to say thank you again. Frank mentioned the AFN, AGA. It just got postponed an hour ago to September 3rd to 5th due to the wildfires and the impact on all of our communities. So that's good. They're postponing it, so we still have time to organize and get your resolution in. All right. Speaking of the Guardians community, I am pleased to introduce one of the crowd favorites at these gatherings, a panel of guardians talking about their work, what their work means to them and their communities. Here to guide us is Amos Scott. Amos is the director of the Northern Indigenous Stewardship, which fosters connections and information sharing among guardians and stewardship programs across Northern Canada. Based in Yellowknife, Amos spent many years making films in the north. He will introduce the guardians who are joining him today. Let's have a round of applause, please.
Thank you for the introduction. And why don't we have the guardians come up, please? Taylor, Randy, Angelina's already here. And we'll get to it. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, and I personally want to hear from these amazing people. So as the others come up, I'm just going to launch right into this. Angelina, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell me where you're from. Paint the picture of your beautiful territory.
I have a load of notes, just like I did yesterday. So hello again to all you beautiful faces. Quay, thank you for having me for this wonderful event. It's truly amazing to see so many important people in one area. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that I am not an official guardian myself, but I do work as a manager within a natural resources department, and part of my role is supporting and coordinating the incredible work that our guardians do. I do, however, spend quite a bit of time in the field with them, learning from them, listening to the elders, youth, and seeing firsthand the importance of the presence of our guardians on our lands and waters. I try to be fully engaged whenever I can. I'm proud to be here today as a mentor to our guardians from Mealbogek First Nations way down in Newfoundland. We are located on the south coast. Our work takes place both the land and water, living in balance with all of life's creations. I'll pass it on to you.
Just introducing ourselves? Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Delary. I'm from Chippewa of the Thames First Nations. I'm also from Oneida Nation of the Thames. I'm Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. I'm Turtle Clan. I'm 26 years old. I currently go to Western University. I major in Indigenous Studies with a minor in criminal justice. And I've been a guardian with Chippewa for coming up on 4 years now. Prior to that, I had no experience in the land. I didn't know about the Guardians program. Truthfully, 5 years ago, I would not think I would be here, and let alone speaking. I didn't know public speaking came along with being a guardian, but I've gotten quite used to it, and I'm proud of it. I love doing it. I love being a guardian, and I love hearing everyone's voices. I love hearing the youth, especially. The panel this morning of the youth was so awesome and really uplifting. It gave me a lot of comfort for this, and I've provided some photos too that are bringing me comfort. Reminds me of home. That's my brother there and my cousin actually in the water looking for turtles. I'll share. That's all I'll share for now. Miigwech.
And Randy.
Nino Randy Malak, then Ujapan Shahajit, Newfoundland Labrador, and that's Ino Nation, Ino Park Guardian. 2 years as I got that sin. Man, not that sin. Man, the Nagani King Quest 2024 champion. The longest snow be in the world. Okay, it's me, Randy Malak. I'm from Newfoundland, Labrador, and Shishishi, and I'm working at Ino Nation, Ino Parks Guardian, and I love my job, and I was a King's Quest champion 2024 in my hometown. It's the longest snowmobile in the world. Yeah, man.
3,500 kilometers, right?
3,500 kilometers.
Snowmobile race. That's like, well, I was going to say I'm from Northwest Territories. That's like going from Yellowknife to Edmonton and back. Long way. Angelina, let me ask you. I noticed over the last few days the role of elders that it plays in Guardian programs and how important it's been to Guardian programs and to the vision of things. For you, how has elders played a role in the work that you do?
So, our elders are our teachers. I'm sure we can all agree on that. And I have great respect for our elders, any elders, truthfully. They are the ones guiding me through this role with their teachings and all of their knowledge. I have a great relationship with our elders. I often go to these elders groups. They have elders groups back home, and I often go there just to sit and hear their stories and to learn from them. They're always so welcoming if you can drink all of the tea and eat all of the pastries they offer you. So elders are pretty important to my community as well. We would not have what we have if it wasn't for our elders. They are our teachers and our guidance as we need to preserve the stories and carry them forward. That is very important to my community for the elders, is for them to sit down with the youth, to share those stories, to share the teachings, and make sure that it keeps going for all of the generations that are coming up too. That's how we preserve our way of life, is by living through our elders and teaching to our children and our grandchildren to move those values forward. So our elders is what keeps us living and keeps our hearts strong.
It's beautiful. For Taylor and Randy, I know you guys work in the field, right? Like you get to be out as guardians and do the field work. What for you, how has the land impacted you and changed the work you do or the way you think about the world?
Like I said, so I've been coming up 4 years in November with Diamond, and like I said, I didn't know about Guardians. I could never see myself working in an environment. I always thought that had to do with science. But I grew up on the res, but I went to school in town. So I always felt this longing and disconnect while I lived on the res. And this job has just given me so much meaning and so much growing my cultural identity again. And I learn from the land. I often hear people refer to the land as their university. Like, we don't need to go to school for that, and that's so. It's really nice to hear. And this is my sister here with a baby painted turtle, and I just like being that. I just like that Diamond and I are that representation that, healing is the land, and just the simplicity of being in the land, and having moments like that can bring so much happiness and peace to youth, and this is what continues them to come out. And she has now grown a deep love for her clan and these turtles, and she wants to expand her knowledge, and she pursues school and that to continue that work, and just little impacts like that make this work so good. And just back to your question, again, I'll emphasize, I just couldn't see myself doing that 5 years ago, and I can't express how much that's changed my life and just greatly improved, my overall mental health. I don't see this as work. I don't see this as a 9 to 5. It's just, the way I want to continue to live my life and grow. So much.
Randy, did you want to contribute to that question? How's the land influenced you and your life and your work?
What?
The land, working on the land, how has it influenced your life and the work that you do?
Working in land, I feel amazing. Learn something.
Yeah.
And
do you get a chance to share that with other people in your community now that you're a guardian?
yeah, I will share to the other people, the young ones.
Yeah.
Show them, teach them how to be a guardian, the young ones.
Yeah.
And show them what we're doing.
So you've been a trapper and a hunter before you've been a guardian. and you now get to share with youth. What is it that being able to use those skills that you have in your life and sharing it to the next generation? What is it about that brings you hope?
Brings me hope. I think I'm getting to my grandfather. I was learning to my grandfather, starting helping my grandfather doing traveling back and forth at home. I was 14 years old, I think, when I started traveling with my grandfather, and I learned lots of stuff with him. And today, I never got a chance to thank him. But one day I'm going to meet him again. I'm going to thank him, I think.
Right on. Again, how special our elders are to us in this work. You know, we've had a couple days at this amazing event here in Victoria, here on Songhees, Esquimalt, and the Lekwungen territory. And just over the last couple of days, what's been inspiring to you, and it's a question for all of you, what's been inspiring to you, or what have you learned that you will take home with you?
I can start, I guess. So many voices of so many strong people, all working together to achieve a common goal is probably the biggest thing that I learned here. I'm so honored to be sharing a room with so many amazing people. We all work together to take care of Mother Earth in a good way. There is so much support available out there, along with a whole load of guidance. Everyone here that's to your right, to your left, will have some type of guidance that they can share with you. So much opportunity to be involved in your culture, so much opportunity to get out on the land and learn from each other and just knowledge share and make those connections. I've made so much connections here since I've been here. I'm forever grateful. I learned that I have such a large, wonderful family right from coast to coast. Well, Alan, thank you.
And Taylor, just before you answer that, I've been curious. So you were a guardian, but you're also running around with a microphone and a camera the last few days. How'd that happen for you?
I'm just trying to think. That was a long story. Diamond and I just started maybe a year into our Guardians program. And Jen had reached out to us, the lead on the Storytellers program. We did like a phone call, and we were just telling her, I think they wanted more perspective of an urban community, because like we're in the middle of Toronto, Detroit, London, Ontario is really close to us, and other neighboring communities. But so we're telling her about our work, and her email back to us saying we were approved to do this Storytellers program was lost in our junk email, so we didn't get that for a year. We just recently started with them. Diamond and I run a Instagram page, DZ Guardians. We were posting on there, and they like that. They like the vlog style. So we've been got like gear to properly help us film, and sheets to help us outline the story we want, and then that got us to this point. So we were tasked to interview you guys and post on for their Instagrams and stuff, and we had that light to give you guys that nice shiny look. And it's been really nice. Like I've always considered myself a little shy, off to the side, and it's given me a chance and an opportunity to actually just take myself out of that comfort zone and approach everybody and ask them questions about what did you enjoy and what are you hoping to learn, where are you from. Just allow people to share their stories, and as they're telling their stories, I can't help but just be in awe because of how similar and just how nice it is to hear how they're taking Guardians into their hands and what they're working on, and like how many similarities we have, like when it comes to youth and stuff like that. And our youth love it. So on our Instagram, our youth are constantly sending us TikToks on what we should try and stuff like that. So that will be fun, and I think it gives it gives guardians that platform for people who are non-Indigenous, are just simply curious about what guardianship looks like. Yeah, so it's been a great tool. I like storytelling. Yeah, I think it's great. I've been enjoying it so far.
Randy, you speak your language. Tell me about your language a little bit. What's your language?
Inuimun, that's my language.
And back home, is that the language you mostly work, or like, is that your day-to-day? You speak your language day-to-day?
Yeah, we mostly speak our language. All of us are guardians in there.
Okay, well, let's try something. I'm going to ask you a question, but you answer back in Innu. And then I'm going to put Val on the spot to translate. All right? So, there we go. Maybe we can run a microphone over to Jimmy, but let's try it anyway. So I understand you've only become a full-time guardian recently.
Yeah.
What has that opportunity been like for you, and what do you love about now having a job as a guardian?
And it's to see the land and scout the land. Okay. Heb not man dat sene wawat man ino si nesi papampa tayan no days padan Labrador no tam den to see den digit.
Jack, do you have a follow-up question? Or Jimmy?
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. No, he's saying that he loves the land. You know, he travels all over Labrador, and he knows Labrador like at the back of his hand.
Okay, my follow-up question is, for somebody who knows their land so well, how special is it to you to have a job to take care of it now?
You know? Gina ko to mo ko to he hemet tasina na ko to tamat ma the way he hemna ni he pom na ni pi
Kadi?
He was saying that, you know, he loves his job, you know, being able to take, you know, to, I guess, to monitor or to, you know, watch over the land and the rivers and the animals. He said he loves it. He loves the job.
Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate you sharing our language with us, or your language with us. And to wrap it up, kind of back to the same last question is, what have you, for Taylor, what have you had the opportunity to specifically learn in the last couple of days, and how will you take that home and apply it to your work?
So I like I said, I was doing a lot of storytelling, so I kind of missed out on a little bit of the discussion going on, but that's all right. I learned through the stories, and I think just because like I sat recently in the youth panel, and I'm kind of a little fuzzy on the first 2 days, but I was telling them earlier, I just see the power in our voices, and you know, as they were going on, a lot of them said, "Sorry, I'm nervous," but then they continued to carry on with such, you know, just powerful words, and I guess I just reaffirmed that the power us youth hold, and just how much our voice matters, and just allowing us that space, like here at the Guardians Gathering, is so important. And just let alone having youth on the land, being there is just so crucial. And I see it in my community, like these guys here who completed a month-long Guardians training program, and you know, same thing, none of these kids get that opportunity, and they have that longing, that desire to get out there. And I just see the effects on their faces and that light that it brings to them. And they just want to continue. They're always, you know, hitting up Diamond and I, when can we come out? when a little turtle releases and be just anything, they want to be out on the land. And I guess that's what I've learned over the past Guardians Gathering is just the simplicity of how important it is to have youth and just to be able to give them that space and be that mentor and be that comfort person for them so that they actually want to come out and learn from you. And yeah, I that's a repeating message I guess I keep hearing. And yeah, I just, even me being up here, so miigwech for that. Miigwech for having me.
Yeah. Angelina, the last question to you is, now that we're talking about youth, and you were mentioning that you've been mentoring youth in the work that you do, how do you see youth guardians as the future for us?
Any youth is the future for any nation. Youth is the ones who's going to move us forward. Our guardians that are current now are the ones that are preparing Mother Earth for a new generation of guardians to take care of her well-being. Our youth are our empowerment. They have such precious minds that we can shape and teach them our ways, and they can retain so much knowledge that they're going to pass down. So it's very important to have our youth engaged in these. Back home where we have student youth programs in the summertime, and they get out with our land guardians and they learn from them, and then they go home and they share the stories with their younger siblings or with their parents, and it's a joyous time for the community to see them out in the regalias and dancing and doing traditional harvesting and just taking that knowledge and pushing it along. It strongly shows us that we're hopeful that our traditional ways and our values are going to live on through our generations. Our generations is the most important thing, and we have to take care of Mother Earth now, so our generations to come will have Mother Earth to also take care of in their time.
Hey, well, let's leave it at that. I think on a high note, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to Randy for stepping outside of your comfort zone, sharing your language. If you have any last things you want to say, you're welcome to. And being on this panel and getting to the point where we're at the end of, I guess it's 3 amazing days now. It feels like it could be a month, or it could have been like a blink of an eye. But and then to Taylor also for coming up here and kind of out of your comfort zone and showing your leadership in that way. Both of you, the leaders that you are as members of your community and as guardians. So thank you very much for that. And Angelina, for the work you do. I specifically have a soft spot for the ones that are coordinators, because they do so much for their programs and for their communities. They're the ones that are like the anchor of everything. So Mussy for your work and all that you do. And and to the conference, or to the gathering, I should say, to the Indigenous Leadership Initiative and the National Guardians Network. Thank you for caring for all of us in the last few days and creating a space where we can learn so much and create family. Masicho.
Masicho. Thank you to this wonderful panels for sharing your experience and sharing with us your leadership. Let's have another round of applause, please. Again, we'd like to thank you for your leadership, for your words that gets to the heart of what it means to have guardianship, and reminding us that being a guardian is good for the people, it's good for the land and waters, it's good for our communities, and it's good for our future, and it's good for our leadership because you are leaders in your communities. This is my second time serving as the MC of a National Guardians gathering. I hope to be invited back again. I think I was kind of funny. I don't know. I played this role at the 2019 gathering in Vancouver. That was a lot of fun. It's been inspiring to see new faces and to see how much the Guardian Network has grown, and to hear all of these inspiring, heartwarming, and really heartfelt presentations that we've seen today. It's a wonderful time to be in a room with so many people that feel this connection and feel this way about our land and our people. So when you get emotional talking about your land and your people, that's why, because that's your connection in here to your land, and you're upholding your own Indigenous law by protecting, in our language we call that shahomas. So I love being here. Also, I heard about this auntie circle and hereby would put in my request to join. I don't know, I've been told I'm a good auntie, so there you go. I'm the chairman. Thank you. So like I said, it's wonderful to bear witness to the work that all of you have done, the National Guardian Network, the ILI, all of you in the audience. Thank you. Raising our hands to you, Haitsepka, thanking all of you. Now, I would like to invite Jamie of the National Guardians Network and Valerie of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative to join me on stage for our closing ceremonies. Also like to, while they're making their way up, I understand there's a composite picture somewhere of the red carpet. All of that will make its way to you probably on the email. Welcoming Val and Jamie, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Leah. And please, another round of applause for Leah as our MC, who's done such an amazing job. As I said in my opening, when we have a meeting such as this, I know exactly who to call to help with this. And thank you so much, Leah, for heeding my call. I messaged her on Facebook, and she answered me right away. And she said, yes, what do I need to do? Which is exactly the answer I was hoping for. And so, just a great big Chinishkuminan on behalf of the whole Indigenous Leadership Initiative team, the senior leaders. Just thank you for heeding our call and coming, making this, I think, the greatest Guardians gathering we've had so far. So thank you. It's been such an honor to co-host this with the National Guardians Network, and to see the National Guardians Network grow its own legs and stand on its own feet is really something that is wonderful to see. It's been a dream of many of us for a long time to see that happen. I'm looking at my friend Norma. Thank you so much for your words earlier, Norma, and speaking from your heart in the way that you do. It made me tear up a little bit, but there was so much love in what you had to say, and that's what I felt in all those words. And so thank you very much, Norma. Thank you so much to the amazing comms team, all of the products that have been done, Jordan, the storytellers. If you've been on social media, please check out all the videos. You guys are all over the place. And there's been great comments and sharing, and I've been checking all the different posts. And don't forget to use the hashtags GG25 and National Guardians Gathering, I believe is the other hashtag, if I'm correct. So please post about this. Again, last night, private screening, but share away. We want some buzz to be created around what that happened. around that film. Thank you so much to Carol, Linda, who did, like, she was texting me at 3 a.m. on all this. The volunteers, Julie, who is still probably sitting at the registration desk, and her team for helping us with all of the organization of the gathering. Answers, our travel agent, Laura, who I'm sure you've all emailed many times as you've been making your way here. Thank you to Laura for all that you've done. Thank you so much to the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and Lakwalan people for welcoming us in the way that you have. We have felt nothing but joy and love while we've been here, and we will leave this place with our hearts full and our minds full and our spirits full. So thank you so much for that. The canoe ceremony, I will never forget being in the front of that canoe with my friend and one of my mentors, Gladly Asila, for that ceremony. So with that, I'll pass it over to my partner in crime, Jamie, for her closing words, and then we'll see you off.
I just finished packing and I was like running, so I'm out of breath now. Honestly, the only words that come to mind are thank you. I texted my dad this morning, and his words to me, 77 years old now, was, who would have thought this little Indian girl from the prairies would have such an important role in the world? And I said, Dad, I'm not important. I'm just one little piece of this vast work, this important work. And so really, it's thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. Thank you for letting me come on this journey with you. And thank you for seeing me and being with me and being family to me. Because we're all in this together. And I wouldn't have the faith, the love, or the happiness that I carry if it wasn't for all of you. Every one of you are important because the Creator says so. And I honor that, and I honor my journey with you, beside you, and anywhere you need me to be, I will be there. Y'all have the 1-800 number. I'll pick up, I promise. If you need me outside of being a guardian, if you need a sister or an auntie or a mom or a friend, pick up the phone and call me. I am there for you. We are in this together, and I love you all. Thank you, and I cannot wait to do this again with you soon.
Thank you, Jamie. I'd love to ask our wonderful elder, Frank Brown, who's agreed to come back and close this in the right way, to join us and do the closing. Not you, Frank, George. Oh, it's one of those days. I'm sorry, Frank. Jeez. Elder Frank George from the Hawaiian people, please come up and join me in doing a good closing.
I don't think my name is Frank Brown. Siap the Chelacha, Siap Nashawalakwa, Asa, Wokaletsa, Jessa Eslasin at Lakwangan. My dear friends and relatives, My traditional name is Wokaletsa. My borrowed name is Frank George, and is sometimes Frank Brown. It was an honor to have the National Guardians of First Nations from across the country visit us at Victoria, BC for this excellent meeting. We all know this meeting was a huge success. I hope everything went well for each and every one of you. It was a pleasure meeting you all, and I met some of you that I've met before. It was a pleasure to see you again. However, sadly, it is getting close to closing this meeting, and I hope you all had a good time visiting us, visiting our city. But as we all know, it's good to attend meetings, but it's always better to get back home to your own homes. My granddaughter Cassidy used to say when we traveled, when she was a little girl, when she got back home, she would always say, "Home, sweet home." She still says that today. Everyone have a safe trip home. I will say a prayer for your safe journey, and thank you all for visiting us once again. Please come back and visit us sometime. Tiria Sensa, I will pray. Thesa Siamp, Haichko Atha Hawas Quechal, Haichko Atha Mak Sangastang, Haichko Atha Chacha Tongath, Chacha Desa Qua, Takwadi Quam Comptus Qualiquence at Islingeth, Haichko Atha Scapeth Tia, Haichko Thesis Siamp, Haichko C-E-M. English translation. I will give thanks, Creator. Thank you for this new day. Thank you for all the sacred earth, the sacred ocean. Please strengthen the minds of all of us. Thank you for this 3-day gathering. Nakwal. Be good/kind to each other. Thank you, honored ones. Haichkohela. Thank you all. And please come back to visit us again. And I have to mention that I've been learning my language for the last 5 or 6 years, my Lekwungen language, and I enjoyed it so much. It's really changed my life. So I hope everyone here that maybe is not following their language tries to learn it, because I've really enjoyed the last 5 or 6 years. I go around making speeches around Victoria, welcomes, prayers, and I really enjoy that, meeting different people all the time. So it was a pleasure having you all here, and I hope you come back again. I raise my hands to all of you. Aichkwasiam. 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 Thank you all again, and have a good trip home. Safe trip. Thank you.
One last thing, if you had a listening device, please leave it at the top of the stairs. If you had a listening translator device, please leave it at the top of the stairs. Also, there's a lost phone at the registration desk, and you may have to dance for it. I don't know. Take care.